The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Mercy Medical Center's live webinar. If your computer doesn't have speakers and you wish to access the webinar toll-free, click on the Additional Numbers link under Audio. Today we'll be discussing teen suicide with Julie Lemon, licensed mental health counselor at Mercy Family Counseling. After her discussion, she will take questions from our audience. To submit your questions anytime during the discussion, go to the window in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and type in your question. If you don't see the screen, click on the orange box with the white arrow. Your questions will be anonymous, completely confidential. Let's get started, Julie.
Thank you for tuning in today as we discuss the distressful topic of teen suicide. As a therapist for Mercy Medical Center, a mother, and someone who enjoys working with adolescents, this topic is extremely important to me. I'll begin by sharing the very concerning statistics related to teen suicide. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds following accidents and homicide. It is the fourth leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds. There are an estimated 8 to 25 attempted suicides for each teen suicide death. And females are more likely to attempt suicide, but males are more likely to complete a suicide attempt. For example, a survey done in high school showed that girls attempt suicide twice as often as boys, typically through overdosing and cutting, while boys die by suicide 4 times as often as girls. The reason being that males tend to be more impulsive. They use more lethal methods, such as guns, and they tend to be more resistant to interventions, such as participating in counseling. The survey also showed that 60% of high schoolers reported that they had thought about suicide, and 9% had tried at least once. That means more than half of the students out there have thought about suicide, and nearly 1 in 10 have attempted it. And it's important to note that 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide have previously given clear warning signs. Now let's address what the risk factors and warning signs might be. A young person who demonstrates aggressive or disruptive behaviors and/or has a very little support system may be at risk for suicide, as well as a young person who is engaging in the use of alcohol and drugs. Also, a teenager who has a family history of violence, depression, or suicide might be at greater risk, especially a teen who may have been physically or sexually abused earlier in his or her childhood. Another statistic I'd like to share with regards to risk factors is that 90% of all people who die by suicide have a diagnosable psychiatric disorder, such as depression, anxiety, or bipolar, and this puts them at risk, especially if they are not being treated. Also, a teenager who has access to firearms is clearly at greater risk for suicide because 60% of all suicides are committed with a gun. Another risk factor could be a teen who is dealing with homosexuality in an unsupportive family or a hostile school environment. One more point that I'd like to make is that a teen who is involved in an unhealthy or an abusive teen relationship could be at risk, and a teen who is experiencing the end of a teen relationship could also be at risk. Let's discuss the warning signs a suicidal teen might give. He or she might talk of death or suicide or going away. They might talk of feelings of hopelessness or feeling guilty. They might pull away from friends and family and show disinterest in their favorite activities or show a lack of interest in engaging in any activities at all. They may have trouble concentrating and focusing, and they're more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors such as fighting, substance use, and risky sexual activity. Other warning signs could be changes in eating habits and sleeping patterns, behavioral problems at home or at school. They may experience declining grades, and their school performance might suffer. They might give away their prized possessions, and they also may have mood swings. While mood swings are common with teenagers, severe mood swings could be indicative of a more serious problem. Another warning sign that we're going to talk about more in a minute is depression. And lastly, I cannot stress enough, if a teenager has a plan, they need immediate attention. When a young person first comes in to see me, we discuss confidentiality, and I make them aware that most topics we discuss can stay between the two of us. However, I have to talk with their parents if they indicate that they are considering hurting themselves or someone else. I worked with one client who admitted to me that he was considering suicide, and he had a very specific plan. In that situation, I shared with him that I was going to have to tell his mother and encourage her to take him to the emergency room. This young man ended up being in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I have also had to talk with parents of other clients when their child indicated thoughts of suicide, and in every situation, the child was okay with me making that call or having that visit with the parents. Most of them just want to get help but don't know how to ask for it. Some indications that a person may have a plan might be them actually saying, "I'm thinking of committing suicide," or "I want to kill myself," or "I wish I could die," "Life isn't worth living," or "I'd be better off dead." Other verbal hints would be saying things such as, "I want you to know something in case something happens to me," or "I won't trouble you anymore," or "Everyone would be better off without me." They may show signs of extreme cheerfulness following periods of severe depression. They may create suicide notes or obtain a weapon, and they might express bizarre or unsettling thoughts on occasion. I mentioned teen depression. Teen depression can take different forms. The first one being major depression. About 5% of teens are suffering from major depression at any one time, and about 20% of teens will experience depression before they reach adulthood. About 2% of teens are affected by dysthymia, which is a milder, longer-lasting form of depression. Teens who are experiencing some type of adjustment, like their parents' divorce, the loss of a friend, or a move to a new town, could suffer from what we would diagnose as an adjustment disorder with depressed mood. It is important to note that untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide. The signs and symptoms of depression, any of these forms of depression, would be the same as the warning signs of suicide risk, as well as lack of energy, anxiety, irritability, and uncharacteristic pessimism. So let's address some of the causes of teen depression. First of all, the normal maturation process of a teenager causes distress in and of itself. They grow and change at different rates, and their brains are not fully formed, but they think they are, so their thoughts are not always realistic. But to the teen, they truly believe their thoughts are accurate. In their distorted thinking, they may see suicide as the only escape from a situation that seems impossible to deal with, or they may feel they need relief from horrible thoughts or feelings. They also might be trying to escape feelings of rejection, hurt, or loss. Some may think they are unwanted, unloved, victimized, or like they are burdens to other people. Another cause of depression could be a reaction to a disturbing event, such as was talked about earlier with the adjustment disorder, a parent's divorce, a move, the loss of a friend. Also, transitioning to high school or college can be traumatic for a young person. Next, low self-esteem is a huge concern and can cause depression. Our young people don't believe they are smart enough, cute enough, skinny enough or talented enough. This idea that they aren't good enough is often reinforced by the values and views presented in the media. The last cause of teen depression that I'm going to address is bullying. Recent statistics show that 77% of students are bullied mentally, verbally, and physically. That's 77% of students. Bullying is increasingly viewed as an important contributor to youth violence, including homicide and suicide. And some case studies have suggested that bullying was a factor in incidents such as Columbine and other high school shootings. More and more often, we hear of teens committing suicide because of merciless bullying by their peers. And this bullying is not always occurring at school or on the bus. Young people are now exposed to cyberbullying that occurs over the internet, through Facebook or in chat rooms. There is a website called bullying.org that is dedicated to increasing the awareness of bullying and to preventing, resolving, and eliminating bullying in our society. Increased bullying is one of the reasons that suicide rates are climbing. Other reasons are the fact that it's easier to gain access to the tools needed, such as guns and pills. The pressures of modern-day life are greater, and there's more competition for good grades and college admission. There is also more violence today in the media through the news, television, movies, and sometimes there is a lack of parental interest and involvement in the child's life. It might also just be that the parents have become overwhelmed with all of the current responsibilities and they feel they have no time to interact with their child. So let's finally talk about suicide prevention and what to do. First of all, it is essential to acknowledge there is a problem if you have noticed changes in behaviors. Do take it seriously. 70% of all people who commit suicide give some warning of their intentions to a friend or a family member. Also, be willing to listen. Even if professional help is needed, your friend or loved one will be more willing to seek help if you have listened to him or her. Second, demonstrate care. Voice your concern. Take the initiative to ask what is troubling your friend, coworker, or loved one, and attempt to overcome any reluctance on their part to talk about it. Third, seek treatment. If the person seems willing to accept treatment, do one of the following. Call 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK to find resources in your area. These numbers will be repeated later. Bring him or her to a local emergency room or community mental health center. Your friend will be more likely to seek help if you accompany him or her. It also might be a good idea to contact his or her primary care physician or mental health provider. And it is important to remove all lethal weapons, guns, pills, and ropes from the home. If all else fails, call 911 in order to get help keeping your friend safe. There are also things you should not do when dealing with a suicidal person. For instance, don't try to cheer the person up or tell them to snap out of it. Don't minimize their feelings. A fight with a friend might not seem like a big deal to us, but for a teen it can feel immense and consuming. Don't assume the situation will take care of itself. Don't allow yourself to be sworn to secrecy. Don't argue or debate moral issues with someone who is suicidal. Don't risk your own personal safety. If you feel like you are in danger, leave and call the police. And don't be afraid to use the word suicide. It may actually help the teen to feel that someone has heard his or her cries for help. If you are a counselor or someone working with a suicidal teen, Suicide treatment should address the following issues: mental and learning disorders. Is the person possibly suffering from a diagnosable illness, and could medication be helpful? Substance abuse problems. Should a referral be made to a substance abuse treatment center, such as Sedlacek or ASAC? If the young person has problems dealing with stress, what are healthy coping skills that he or she could engage in, such as journaling, drawing, or turning to a support system? If there are behavioral problems, then the adolescent could learn behavior modification techniques and learn to behave more appropriately and in a more healthy manner. Another consideration with regards to treatment is whether the teen could most benefit from individualized therapy, family therapy, or is hospitalization necessary? There are several suicide prevention organizations, such as the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, YellowRibbon.org, the National Institute of Mental Health, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Youth Suicide Prevention Program. All of these organizations can be accessed via the web for additional resources. Other resources that you might find helpful are questionnaires, such as the Burns Depression Checklist or the Suicide Risk Questionnaire. These can help assess the severity of the teen's problems, and I frequently use them in my own profession. A couple of recent movies have come out dealing with the topic of teen suicide. One of them is a well-done Christian-based movie called To Save a Life. This movie can be rented at Family Video, and it could be used by parents, teachers, or counselors as a vehicle to save lives and inspire teens to reach out to their communities and engage with the hurting and lonely in their midst. We will show the trailer for this movie in a couple of minutes. The second movie is called Logan, and it is currently in some select theaters. I have not yet seen this one, but it has been recommended by a coworker. Movies can be a great means to getting teens to think about the issues that affect them and possibly get them to open up and talk about their issues. Another way to get them to open up is through the use of books or poems. There is a great poem called Please Hear What I Am Not Saying that I was introduced to in high school during a lecture on suicide. And I still think of that movie or of that poem today, and I'd like to share part of that poem with you. Again, it is called Please Hear What I'm Not Saying. Don't be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the mask, by the face I wear, for I wear a mask, 1,000 masks, masks that I'm afraid to take off, and none of them are me. Pretending is an art that's second nature with me, but don't be fooled. For God's sake, don't be fooled. I give you the impression that I'm secure, that all is sunny and unruffled with me within as well as without, that confidence is my name and coolness my game. That's the water's calm and I'm in command, and that I need no one. But don't believe me. My surface may seem smooth, but my surface is my mask, ever varying and ever concealing. Beneath lies confusion and fear and aloneness. But I hide this. I don't want anybody to know it. I panic at the thought of my weakness exposed. That's why I frantically create a mask to hide behind, a nonchalant, sophisticated facade to help me pretend, to shield me from the glance that knows. But such a glance is precisely my salvation, my only hope, and I know it. That is, if it's followed by acceptance, if it's followed by love. It's the only thing that can liberate me from myself, from my own self-built prison walls, from barriers I so painstakingly erect. It's the only thing that will assure me of what I can't assure myself, that I'm really worth something. But I don't tell you this. I don't dare to. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid your glance will not be followed by acceptance, will not be followed by love. I'm afraid you'll think less of me, that you'll laugh, and your laugh would kill me. I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing, and that you will see this and reject me. So I play my game, my desperate pretending game, with a facade of assurance without and a trembling child within. So begins the glittering but empty parade of masks, and my life becomes a front. I tell you everything that's really nothing and nothing of what's everything, of what's crying within me. So when I'm going through my routine, don't be fooled by what I'm saying. Please listen carefully and try to hear what I'm not saying, what I'd like to be able to say, what for survival I need to say, but what I can't say. With your power to touch me into feeling, you can breathe life into me. I want you to know that. I want you to know how important you are to me, how you can be a creator, an honest-to-God creator of the person that is me if you choose to. You alone can break down the wall behind which I tremble. You alone can remove my mask. You alone can release me from my shadow world of panic, from my lonely prison, if you choose to. Please choose to. Do not pass me by. It will not be easy for you. A long conviction of worthlessness builds strong walls. I fight against the very thing I cry out for. But I am told that love is stronger than strong walls, and in this lies my hope. Please try to beat down those walls with firm hands, but with gentle hands, for a child is very sensitive. Who am I, you may wonder? I am someone you know very well, for I am every man you meet, and I am every woman you meet. That poem has had a 25-year impact on me, so maybe you can use it to help someone that you care about. Now we'll view the preview for the movie To Save a Life.
Life is good, but you live in a dream. Fall back. Look at it be. Fall back. Look at it be. See, in every high school. The Jake. Man, he's always had my back. There are the famous and the forgotten. Just fall back. You can't come. I get it. You're popular. Okay. These are going to be different. Fall back. Today, we come together to remember the life of Roger. Do I know you? My friend's called Chris. I would see him walking to school every day. Always. I never even said hi. Both of us regret. It wasn't your fault. You didn't pull the trigger. Why does everyone keep saying that? I know that I didn't do anything. And none of us did. What's the point? Why didn't I? I feel like I don't even know you anymore. This kid at the party tonight, they wouldn't let him in because he wasn't cool enough. And how messed up is that he wasn't cool enough? Want to say hi? Okay, see them here then. Why is my life going? Maybe it always was. You're just not trying to care. Keep walking, Taylor! Stay away from the cake. I don't need you. I never needed you. Are we getting this? Because if we don't, the consequences are huge. Your future. It's not going to always be easy. Don't give up. This is the story of a young man who gave up being somebody to make a difference. And you make things right. Somebody got to ask yourself, what do you want your life to be about?
Okay, maybe you can use that movie in some way to help someone that you care about. Next, I want to make you aware of a walk that is taking place on October 9th at Knoll Ridge Park. It is a walk to prevent suicide and is called Out of Darkness Walk. We'd like to see a huge turnout for that event. So if any of you can make it, please try to. Again, October 9th at 9:30 a.m. at Knoll Ridge Park. Finally, we have some important phone numbers that I want to make you aware of. Mercy Family Counseling, which is also the number where I can be reached, is 319-398-6575. Mercy's 24-hour access service line is 319-398-6476. And hopefully it will be easy for you to remember either 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK. Now I'd like to take a minute to answer any questions that have been submitted.
Thank you, Julie. To remind our listeners, questions can be submitted from the box in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Our first question, Julie, is from a listener. Why do we hear about copycat suicides in high schools, and how should a parent react? What should they say if one of their children's classmates committed suicide?
First of all, a parent should be sure and address the topic, not be afraid to talk to their child about it, and try to have an open discussion with their child as to how they are feeling. Do they have any of the depression signs or symptoms? And why we hear about it today, I'm not exactly sure. I think teenagers are impulsive and unfortunately think things that are tragic they often think are cool.
Another question. My son writes stories about violence and suicide. Should I be concerned by his writings?
I would definitely address it with him, and again, have that open and honest discussion, not being afraid to use the word suicide, and not be afraid to talk about what's going on in his life that's causing him to write about dark, maybe depressing things.
Another question. I've heard about kids cutting or self-mutilating. Are these teens more at risk of suicide?
Yes, those teens would definitely be at greater risk because they are already expressing the fact that they are experiencing some great unhappiness. And teens that engage in those risky type of behaviors, again, are more likely to be at greater risk for potential suicide attempt. Before we go, I would like to say that if you are someone who has lost a person that you cared about to suicide, please let go of any guilt that you might be carrying and seek comfort and support from friends, family, or a counselor. No matter how much we learn, or how hard we try, or how much we care, sometimes the suicidal person does not allow him or herself to be helped. And if you are someone who has considered suicide, please know that someone cares and wants you to stay alive. The phone numbers that were discussed will take you to someone who wants to help. Thank you to all of you who have been listening in, and thank you for caring about our young people.
Julie, we've had another question come in. As a school counselor, I sometimes have to make a parent contact regarding the child's suicidal tendencies. But what would you recommend for the parent that doesn't think it's serious?
That is really tough. I think you continue to reiterate to that parent that it is serious. Continue to encourage that parent to get help. And if that parent then won't seek the help for them, I would recommend that you as the counselor figure out the ways that you can provide help for that student, even if it means contacting the hospital or even calling 911 if that student is considering it right then. If the parent can't take it seriously, you as the counselor need to take whatever steps you can to get that student some help.
Another question has come in. What kind of services are provided via the Mercy Access service?
That is a good question that I may not have the answer to because I have never actually called that number. I am assuming they will refer you on to whatever services are needed when you call, and I would also assume that they will stay on the line and possibly provide a listening ear for someone who may need it.
Okay. Another question came in. I just wanted to mention that Foundation 2 Crisis Services has a suicide survivor support group for those who have lost a loved one to suicide.
That's great. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Foundation 2 offers a lot of very, very helpful services, and it's important to know that they have that available.
Well, I believe we have, no, one more came in, sorry. Is there a way to get copies of these slides? I'm multitasking and wasn't able to copy down all the phone numbers and other important information. And yes, the answer is that give us about a day and go to this same site, www.mercycare.org/live, and you'll be able to view the complete program. Okay, if you have additional questions, please call Mercy Family Counseling at 319-398-6575. A tape, as I just said, of this program will be available at our site, www.mercycare.org/live, and you can check this website for information about future webinars also. Our next webinar will be held on Tuesday, October 19th at noon. Susan Kilberg, counselor at Sedlacek Center, will discuss teen substance abuse and will take your questions live. Thank you for joining us today.